You're watching Experience Comic Culture and Sales, streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
Hey everybody, what's going on? This is 6-year Jesse James. I am going to be doing a talk show today. We're going to talk about the many variations of how to run a comic book store, how to really look at your comic book collection and understand what you're actually looking at, which is kind of a lost art this day and age. I've been collecting since January 25th, 1982 at the Friendly Neighborhood Comic Book Store in Las Vegas, Nevada. I opened up my store on Jack Kirby's birthday, August 28th, 2009. I am a senior Overstreet advisor. I own about 24 businesses in the comic book industry, as well as Just James Comics in Glendale, Arizona, 8,000 square feet. We also own the largest arcade for a comic book store with about 80 arcade pinball machines, a gaming section with Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, Force of Will, Dungeons & Dragons, a plushie section, which we just added, which we are learning very fast on how to sell plushies and how to pronounce their names correctly. And of course, Just James Comics. Just James Comics has a great eBay page. We have justjamescomics.com/eBay, 82,000 lifetime feedback, never had a neutral, never had a negative. And then Just James Comics in Glendale, Arizona is 8,000 square feet. We carry Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, Modern, Copper, Platinum, and new issues. So to name a few. Not really big into graded books, but everything else we are pretty immaculate on. I hold 2 Guinness Book of World Records in the comic book world as well. So fun stuff. So some of the things you want to look at when you're collecting comics is understanding what you're actually looking at. You know, we call it beyond the cover, understanding comic books beyond the cover. There's 2 types of collectors out there. There are collectors that are numeric, which means they want 1 through 100. And then you have key collectors that maybe they don't want 1 in 100. In New Mutants, they just want 87 and 98 because those are key books. Nothing wrong with that. That has been going on for about, well, I've been collecting and selling books for 40 years. So it's been going on for at least 40 years as far as selling and flipping books. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's kind of the funny thing where that's the smallest part of the business, but that business sells more than the modern customer, right? So that's where you have $3 million books, $2 million books selling, where your normal comic book fan is spending $5, $6, $8 for a new issue. $40 is the average price on a customer pickup for new issues. So if you kind of take 40 times 52, right? That's a lot of money a person is spending on new issues, and that's consistent. It's every single week. When I had a new issue store, hey, Jen, what's going on? There's my compadre, Jen. I've known Jen since 2014. When I was selling new issues, we had a little over 550 box holders on an average of, I think it was $38.50 a box. So that tells you how much money is spent on new issues every week times 5,000 stores across the nation. So new issues are a still big part of our business, but the overall, it's actually the smallest part of the business that is actually sold. Now, are those numbers real or not? Well, maybe not, because again, if you're selling a Superman #1 or Action #1 for $3 million and the AF-15 for 3.5 million, obviously those numbers don't correlate, and it's kind of an unfair advantage, especially with the people that sell it, which is Heritage. So anyways, the first thing you want to look at when you're buying comics is understanding coding. And a lot of people don't understand coding. And I can tell you right now, 98% of the store owners out there probably don't understand coding. And I'm making a joke, but I'm sure it's 50% at least know how to do coding. But it's very important for your customer, for you out there, to understand how to code your book as far as what book it is. So traditionally, most books, and I'm talking about most books, almost 90% of the books put their numbers on the book. Now, I always call this a fail of an editor putting the number of the book on the bottom. I don't think any comic book out there should have the number of the book on the bottom. And the reason for that is, how do we store our comic books, right? We store our comic books in our boxes, and we are used to seeing the numbers across. So as you flip, right, if you flip, because no one really goes like this on every single book. So there's a failure right off there, even before we start. But anyways, traditionally your numbers are right corners. That's traditionally where right corners were. Originally, they started in left, but they realized there's more people that would notice it this way, just like me trying to figure out where this sits on the screen. So the big thing is understanding your coding. So your coding is right here. And your coding, the first three numbers are the issue number. So in this case, it's issue number 4. We might not be able to get close enough to show you this, but you can grab a book and look. Your second number is if it's a variant. So this is 4, issue 4, cover A. So it says 411. So 41. So that's 41. 1 is cover A, 2 is cover B, 3 is cover C, and you move forward there. The last number is your print run. So as you know, we do a lot of second prints, third prints, fourth prints, fifth prints, sixth prints. A print run is determined day after printing, right? So if it prints on the 5th and you print something on the 6th, it's considered a second run. It could be the same cover, but if you print it on the next day, it is considered a second run. Now, there's one thing that a publisher could do. They could say, listen, we had 1,000 books damaged and we're just doing 1,000 books as a first print. They'll sign their affidavit so that everybody knows that coming off the thing is to make up for damaged books. Every run that is made already has. Now, I was corrected, and I'm glad the person corrected me this past Saturday on a show that I was doing for someone. Is traditionally when they make comic books, there's a 10% overprint, and the 10% overprint is to cover damages and shortages, and that stays at the warehouse forever until they're allowed to wholesale that batch out. So they have changed that to 5%, and I'm very interested in that 5% number. So they're either telling us that less books are being damaged and less books are being lost, or they're also telling us that they just don't want to print that many books afterwards. Print run overages does not count against count. So if I say 100,000 books are made and my print run is overage is 5%, that about 5,000 books do not count in the count. Does someone manage that? I don't think so, right? I think those eventually make themselves out. There is a difference when you're doing it exclusives, but we'll get that to that a little bit later. So when you look at variant covers, let me take this off here. Okay, when you're looking at variant covers, traditionally, since the modern age of variant covers, they traditionally write variant covers on the book. Traditionally, they will write variant covers on the book. But when you're now understanding how to do your barcodes, you can go and look at the number. And it will tell you, like in this case, again, you might not be able to see it on the screen, but this says 521. So that's issue number 5, variant cover B, first print. So that's how you tell those books. Now, keep in mind, this is modern age books. Barcodes really didn't come into fruition until direct marketing, which was actually Dazzler number 1, I believe, was the first newsstand issue to come to the market. Newsstands were created because most comic book stores, even when I worked in 1982, you just looked at the cover. Oh, it says $1. You add it up. There was no scanning. Well, as they started hitting 7-Elevens more and Circle K's and Walmarts and Walden Books, those people used barcodes. So newsstands were created. And so that was kind of this big jump. Newsstands, very small portion of a publishing run. So back in the day, if they made 10,000 books, maybe 2,500 books went to direct market uh, stores, and then the rest went to comic book stores. So now, and this started about 4 years ago, I would like to challenge. Yes, and I'll get to Adisha pages in a second, but the most important part is the comic book world as a whole isn't run by anybody when it comes to pricing. So if you're an overstreet advisor, that's all you are. You're an advisor to a, well, this is a starting point. And what happened was companies started coming out, CBSI, Key Collectors, Top 10, Cover Price, and all that. And they decided that they were then use algorithms, and they were then use kind of rule of law of averages, right? So traditionally, how you price stuff is if you got 10 prices, you take out your top price, you take out your bottom price, you take your 8, the average of those 8, that's your price. As an overstreet advisor, I kind of guesstimate because I don't know what everybody's selling their books for. The gauge became eBay in the sell department. So you would go there, and Key Collectors and all that, they go in there and they formulate all those prices, and that's how prices are created. Now, I'm going to say this in a political way, that about 4 years ago, someone decided that newsstands would be worth 25% to 50% more than just your modern direct issue or a direct issue from a comic book store. So if it had a barcode, it was actually worth more because, again, only 25% of that print run was done back in the day. So when you look at the best example right now is X-Men 221. And X-Men 221 in a direct issue is worth about anywhere from $100 to $150, but a newsstand is worth anywhere from $300 to $500, right? And so very, very interesting how our culture of how we created value in the comic book world is simply amazing. I was just talking to Jen about a book she just sold, and it was a very high price book that she sold, but she had a gauge next to it to say, oh, well, that person's selling it for this price, so let me try this price, and boom, it sells. And that should correlate somewhere down the road, and sometimes it doesn't unless we actually call those people and say, hey, I just sold this XYZ. With the introduction of live streaming, the rules have changed again, right? Because live streaming values that are sold are not dictated to eBay. So Key Collectors and all these other companies can't evaluate the pricing off a live stream company. There is a company that is working on what's called time-stamping sales. So if you have a big sale, you timestamp it, you send it. They verify that that book was sold some way, shape, or form, and that's put in the system. Now, the other thing that is very important, and I can tell you again that very few store owners in the world coach this to their customers, is what is called is a Disha. Now, back in the day, they were supposed to be at the very front of the book. And the reason why they were in the very front of the book is because the publishers thought it was very important for you to actually know the real numbers. What volume are you buying? Which is very important. If you collect Deadpool and you don't know the volume of your books, you're then really screw up your 2004, 2005, 2006 them, and you're going to interchange them. So we have what's called the Adisha, and the Adisha is inside your book. Now, in this case, it's on the last page. Last page. DC is the first person to actually do them on the last page. It looks like Marvel decided to do this as well. And this gives you all the information that you need about a comic book. That tells you, it's going to tell you the print run. It's going to tell you where, what volume it is. If it's volume 1, the issue number that it is. So if you collect Classic Illustrated, which is probably the worst example in the world because you have to know the HR on all the numbers. But anyways, you can go in there and you can see the number. It gives you the company information. So if you're buying a Marvel book, it tells you about all the information in that Marvel book. It tells you where it's printed. Is it printed in the United States? Is it printed in Canada? Is it printed in the UK? It's a bundle of information that a lot of people don't use. And in reality sense, as a comic book reader, need to know that. Probably not, but it's good to know why it's there. It's to give you information on the comic book that you just bought. So if you look back in the day when me and Jen started collecting, when you saw a cover, we knew that's who all was in the cover, and we know he was then fight all these green dudes and blue shirt dudes in this book. Now they put Deadpool on a cover, but Deadpool's not even in the comic book. So very, very interesting. But knowing your Adesha and your barcodes are very, very important. Very, very important stuff. Obviously, no barcode on the cover, no wording on the cover. That is called a non-dress cover. I know in the industry they call it a virgin cover. Unfortunately, well, not fortunately, and unfortunately, you can't say that on certain platforms. So yeah, exactly. If you don't know what's on the cover, sometimes it really, really can throw you off. Non-dress covers, virgin covers are the worst for people misunderstanding the comic book they just bought, right? So very, very important to coach yourself on what you're collecting and why you're collecting. It's comics traditionally, right, when the very first comic book series came out was by Marvel Comics, and a limited series, I should say, was Marvel Comics 1982, and was called Contest of Champions 1, 2, 3, right, is the first limited series. So they weren't sure that they could sell a book that only went to 3 issues. And so when it did hit, it was great. Why? Because then we created Wolverine 1, 2, 3, 4. We created Secret Wars. We created Crisis on Infinite Earth. These are must-read comic books. Crisis on Infinite Earth and Marvel Secret Wars. Those are must reads. If you're a comic book fan and you're getting into Marvel and DC, you want to read those 2 books. Crisis on Infinite Earth is a absolute must, or you will not know anything about the new Bronze Age, well, not Bronze Age, Modern and Up, Copper and Up, I should say, Copper and Up DC lineup on how multiple planes of Earth and all that work in the DC universe. Yep. Very, very cool. So you need to understand that. It's also like if you get, it's kind of the weird thing where you look at Death of Captain Marvel. Death of Captain Marvel came in a magazine format, right? But that was actually a compendium trade paperback. And so they didn't know that they can make them shorter, expand the widths of the book. Now, Death of Captain Marvel, in my words, the greatest story ever told in the comic book world, because a superhero dies of natural causes, or not natural causes, cancer, but you know what I'm trying to get at there. So very, very important books. We all have our important books. Like, so for me, it's Death of Captain Marvel, Crisis on Infinite Earth, Secret Wars, Wolverine first series, Marvel Contest of Champions, Tales of the Green Lantern Corps, Captain America 300, the most important Captain America book you will ever read in your life. If you have not read Captain America 300, you are missing out a historical part for Captain America, especially when it gets to the last page. So check that out. And then my all-time favorite read that's not really a must read is Korvac Saga, right? Korvac Saga is a great series because everybody dies but 2 people, or 2. Well, you have a. Well, I guess Moondragon is a superhero. I always get that mixed up. Is Moondragon a superhero or an action hero? Action heroes has strength. She's not. She's a mutant. So before Jen comes in and says she's a mutant, I believe. So yeah, Crisis on Infinite Earth. I think is the greatest series of all time for our generation. I know the modern generation might come in and say, no, no, no. Gen X might say, no, it might be this. I don't know what it is. Apparently, they haven't read on Crisis on Infinite Earth, but it is, I believe, one of the most, or it is the most important series in DC world. Very, very important. Tales of the Green Lantern Corps, you could kind of say doesn't exist for Blackest Night and Brightest Day. It's misleading, right? I took advantage of Tales of the Green Lantern Corps when Blackest Night came out because I knew no one knew that Necron had fought just the Green Lanterns themselves, and they had won. And so it was a very, very important book for us, for you to read. So know your collection. Know how to read your barcode. Know how to read. Dark Crisis is. I think there's a different reading base, though. I think because it took 12 months for Crisis on Infinite Earth to complete, right? One per month. And keep in mind, those two were banging against each other, DC and Marvel at the time, because they had Secret Wars, and that was just rocking, selling off the boat. And then DC Crisis on Earth came out with issue number 7, Death of Flash, or is that Death of Supergirl? One of the two. And they changed the realm, right? Because no one cared about Spider-Man having a black costume. That was immaterial. I don't think that became even, let's see, what is it? Entity of Black Hammer books. I'm all about getting all punch emotion in a book series, and then one pulls, no punches. Yes, for sure. I don't think anybody cared about Superman's black costume for 20 years. Right? I don't think that mattered. I can't remember the most important book I remember in the 80s, and I remember this being on the news, and Nick, you might remember this, Jen, you might remember this, was Thor 337. Thor 337, as a 12-year-old, I had ordered 25 copies. And as a 12-year-old working in the store, I was so excited to get to the store and find out I had one copy in my box, because I had a share, even though I had ordered 25 copies. I was so mad. I quit that day. I jumped on my Pro Huffy sports bike, and I drove to every 7-Eleven in town and bought every copy. And I think at the end of the day, I had my 25 copies, even though I had to pay for them, which was kind of weird, not working them off. Death of Flash was number 8, but I think, Nick, the importance of Death of Flash is the historical cover, and it's the same with the Death of Supergirl. Is they started to realize covers had to be historically important at a first view. Back in the day when Jack Kirby did covers, they did covers, right? And Black Panther jumping in, but the concept was here's a new guy. Right, but Death of Supergirl was so big, and it was so impactful to us as kids and youngins looking at those covers and understanding again what you saw on the cover was what you got inside. So yes, you are correct that even when Jen says you get all pumped up, and then you get to that last page, and it's kind of like what it's kind of like Infinite Gauntlet. If you get to the last page, like, he's just sitting on his porch. Really? This is how this book ends? But the importance of today's show is to educate you to be a little bit smarter when you buy books, understanding that all the information you need is right in front of you. You just have to know what you're looking at and continue to read comics consecutively. Again, the back issue business is the biggest part of the business. If you take conventions, heritage, live streaming, e-commerce, eBay, Amazon, it dwarfs new issues, right? So very, very cool. I know we're at the bottom of the hour here, so we're going to take a quick break here. I'm Jesse James. We will be back in a couple minutes. Make sure to hit that like button and join. Tell your friends. Share this out. Check out all the other shows on The Experience, and I will see you in a few.
Thanks for tuning into The Experience. Help us out and hit subscribe over on YouTube and click the bell when you do. Need some help? Scan the QR code in the bottom corner.
Comic Collectibles is a pretty straightforward show. You got Rex here, he sells the comics, and you got Rockin' Robbie, he knows about the comics. And finally, John, well, no one really knows what John does. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a great guy, but he just keeps showing up. Come to think of it, I don't even really know how he gets in here. Anyway, awesome comics, rare books, rarer signatures, slabbed books, and amazing cover sketches by Ken Hazer and others. Simple formula, you want the comics, you buy the comics. To sum up, Rex sells the comics, Robbie knows the comics, and John, who might possibly be a ghost. I mean, seriously, has anyone ever seen him show up or leave? Comic Collectibles with Rex and John, Mondays from 6 to 8 Eastern on The Experience. Comic Culture and Sales.
Are you a comic creator? Are you a publisher? Do you make a comic book product? Do you own a retail store? Do you do something I haven't thought of? Who are you and what do you do? Let us know by advertising on The Experience and invite our viewers to patronize your product. Message the EXP on social media or email us the_EXP@yahoo.com for more details.
Okay, we are back. What is going on? I am the 6-year Jesse James. I am a old school collector from the 80s. Started working in a comic book store in 1982 as a 12-year-old. Went through life collecting comics every single week, and now I own a great, cool store, and I have fun. Not just reading comics, but selling comics and helping people build their collections from one comic to millions of comics, or millions of comics to an extra million of comics. We also facilitate and purchase a lot of collections across the nation. Over 2 million books were bought over or last year alone. We're not going to double that, but we're going to be buying a lot of books this year. We travel a lot. So we're then continue our conversation on The Experience about importance of comics, kind of in the bigger knowledge of your collection. The one thing I wanted to bring up, I didn't get a chance to bring up, Nick brought up, was the crossover. Green Lantern number 40 jumping over and moving that connection of comics. So Infinite Earth, Secret Wars was actually the last panel of every person that participated in Secret Wars disappeared on the last panel of every single book. So that was pretty cool, right? So pretty cool to get those crossovers. Korvac Saga was in Guardians of the Galaxy. You can go through this. How do you connect the dots, right? How do you get everybody to read this issue and then go over to this new issue or to this new series? Keep in mind, in 1982, I remember opening up the box of Wolverine #1 and holding it up to the crowd and saying, "Who wants this?" And everybody had no idea what a miniseries meant. Even though I had the iconic cover from, what was the iconic cover? Wolverine #1 is Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon. Enter the Dragon. That is a homage cover to Enter the Dragon, if people don't know that. So very, very cool. But crossover is very, very important. Even Marvel and DC did it. You could even say Amalgam was very important to bring those characters together. Iron Lantern and all those characters together for the comic book universe to enjoy and allow yourself to imagine being a superhero or action hero. So the other big thing that happened back in the day was real advertisement, not the mass media advertisement that you see now where it's just one page and they're selling a truck, right? You had real advertisement that a lot of us kids really got into and wanted to buy and own. Even back in the day, I read all the advertisements back to the Army soldiers. I thought it was cool, even though it's the same Army soldier picture with the full page wrap or the flash page. I could picture myself doing that and always wanted to buy it. I bought the Michael Golden X-Men Full Mutant poster, and I cut out some pages in my comics just to get those. I don't think I looked at value of comics for my collection. I started in 1982. When I first realized my comics were worth something was maybe 2005. Didn't care. It was not a notion of this was worth that. I really didn't care about the grade of my book, even though when I bought comics back in the day, I would pull out every comic on the rack, and you still should do this. You should pull out every comic on the rack, immediately look at the spine. And if you see anything on the spine, you take that out and you grab the best book possible for your collection. It would take me back in the day, keep in mind, new issues were Friday when I started. It would still take me 40 minutes to pick out my 15 books because I wanted the best books off the rack. Even though I still didn't care about grade, I still wanted the best books off the rack. I used to sit there with my Slurpee and yell at people in a 7-Eleven when they would, because they bend the books on the rack, and yell and scream at those people. That was very, very funny back in the day. So the other thing you want to look at in the world, and this is big conversation on, I would say, every single talk show out there. Unfortunately, 98% of the people that do talk shows in the comic book world have no idea how it is to work in the trenches in the comic book industry. Most of them that talk about exclusives, we'll call them variants, right? These are not variants, they are exclusives. Variants are a very simple thing. A variant is something that where are my variants? A variant is something that the publisher creates, right? The publisher creates it for the sale at a comic book store or wherever they're selling at. That is created by Marvel Comics. Exclusive means that a certain amount of money or numbers are made for a specific store, like this is Bob's Burger, right? And then most of our jobs, and some fail to do this, but most of our jobs are to create our covers, right? So this one was my whole team on the cover. So that's me, Tom from Big Dog Inc., my tech teams, my shipping teams, my on-floor salesperson's teams. That's a exclusive. Exclusives are exclusives to stores. It's a low print run. Traditionally, independents are 500 or, well, not anymore, 100 to 1,000. Marvel DC, 3,000. That's your counts. All right. Again, you have your 10% overage. But the difference between that is you can actually buy your overage. Now, you're not allowed to count that in your count because if I say there's 500 and my overage is 50 and I buy that 50, my count doesn't go to 550. Those are ghost numbers. What you want to do when you're doing store exclusives as well is not let anybody buy those exclusives, even if you can't afford to buy them, which if you can't afford to buy your overstock, then you shouldn't be doing exclusives. But work with someone to buy them. Don't let someone buy your exclusives. at some discount at the end of that, distributors where they just throw them up and say, 25 cents each, or they sell them to Marvel for their Walmart packs, which happened to a couple retailers a couple of years ago. So the difference is exclusives are sold on a different level. Yes, just to jump back, we actually did with Dynamite, I think our final count was about 30 exclusives done with Dynamite over our time. We had a great rep over there at Dynamite that allowed me to kind of formulate covers with my artists and my creators, sneaking my label on somewhere on the book, even though he's like, well, they really don't want your label. Oh, let's hide it over here in the corner. And I've done that with everything, with image and all that. I have done over, well, I haven't done over. I need to stop saying I've done over. I've done 398 exclusives. There's only one person that's done more exclusives than me. But when it comes to exclusives, it's a funny thing. You're going to sell a percentage, and that percentage is, in my case, was about 35 to 40% of my customer base I could count on buying my exclusive. So if I made 500, I knew 250, 200 copies were sold. Because your customer base will want to support you by buying whatever you had. Now, I struck a deal with Bob's Burger. I don't know if this is on Bob's Burger or not. Yeah, it is. So I was one of the first companies to do this, and I struck a deal with Image, Boom, and Dynamite that all my covers would be displayed on the back with release dates. So if you look, these are the release dates of the covers here. So if you bought, hypothetically, this book, you would see that you missed 2 other books over here. So you would call me up and say, oh, I got this book, but I need these other 2 covers. So when we did a book this way, and we will continue to do it this way, number one, you as a store, if you're a store listing, you want to do not just one cover. You want to kind of do 3, 4, 5, and you want to work that deal to better your numbers, better your promotions, and all the swag that you get with it. But the goal is to do number 10, but be able to backtrack and sell your 9s and the 8 with the packages. So very, very important that you really work the deal to get the last page. I will tell you, there are stores out there that don't know how to maximize their back page. Most of the books I did with a lot of companies, not with Dynamite and Image, was I actually got an interior page too. And I said, listen, if I'm going to do this, then I want an interior page. But anyways, so the other thing is, so you got variant, so you got your cover A's and all the variants, and then you have your ratio comics, so it's 1 in 10, 1 in 25, 1 in 30. The notion on pricing is that if it's 1 in 25, that means it's $30. If it's 1 in 50, it's $60. You kind of add some keystone to it, 10% or whatever you want to add as your keystone. So you have all these options for a customer when they walk in, and the options are, how many customers that walk into a comic book store and say, okay, issue number 10 is here. And that customer, you can hand them a number 10, and here's your number 10. And you can hand them any cover you want, because they don't care. They just want issue number 10. Or you're then have your guy that says, I want your variant, or your exclusive, or I only want the variant covers, and you then get the guy that wants all 3 covers. So it's very important to understand your collection. We just bought a collection of Mortal Hulk that had 5 covers for every issue. So we're trying to figure out, okay, value for first print, second print, third print, fourth print, cover B, and the 1 in 50. What are those prices in that formulation? And then as a comic book store, we have to figure, if I have 1 through 20, do I want to break that run and get stuck with 19 copies, or do I want to sell them as a whole? So customers have a lot of opportunity to better their collection by understanding how to read the barcodes, reading the indicia, and then understanding how to put them in order, right? So if you read Secret Invasion, you can put your comics in order by the title, or you can put them in order by Secret Invasion, how they come out: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, so whatever it is, 1 through 50. Blackest Night was the prime example. I buy collections, and you see Blackest Night is a separate whole collection of Green Lantern Corps, Phantom Stranger, all together. They're not in their run. So then you go to the box, and you're like, if you go to your box first, you realize, oh, I don't have all Phantom Stranger. I'm missing a copy. You have to go over here and decide if you're then create that into a run. The other thing you have to understand is the great thing about comic book fans these days, no matter what you hear on shows, I do a lot of shows during the week. Customers still read their books. All right. The notion that customers do not read comic books is mind-boggling to me, that there are people out there that don't realize that if me and Jen counted the next Jen owns Space Cadets in Houston. Don't forget to hit that like button. This is the experience. Share this out. Tell your friends. If me and Jen took a survey of the next 100 customers that walked in the door, it's only 3 to 5% that collect key books. It's a very, very small percentage of people that sell key books. So you have to understand that people are reading books. So you have to have some form of knowledge of at least the concept of what the comic book is about, right? You have to have the layers of what. Okay, well, he's or she's buying that. Hey, Lau, she's buying that, but does she know she has to buy this, right? So that she can understand it and intertwine it together. That's very, very important. Yeah, reading 30, 40 comics a week is a challenge. And here's the thing that's great about comics is we'll read a comic and think, oh my gosh, it's 4 weeks till I get that comic again. But we're so engulfed in our other comics that it goes so fast, right? That you're just reading. And by the time the 4th one comes out, you don't even know you're on the 4th week. All right. So you got a lot of options out there, but the first thing is understanding your comics. The biggest thing I tell people when I do kind of corporate interviews and speaking about the comic book industry is we're the weirdest group. There you go, 50 comics a week. That is awesome, right? The greatest thing about the weirdest thing and the greatest thing about the comic books is Lau most likely puts his product in his long boxes and short boxes. And what do, we spend all this money and we put them in these white boxes or your design boxes, and we put a lid on it. That it's hilarious, right? When you buy a car, you park it out front. Yeah, I can park in the garage, but I want everybody to see my red Mustang. Art, we put it on our wall and all that. But comic book fans, what do? We put it on our checklist. We put it in our box. We close our lids, right? And we go on collecting. You can go front, forwards, and you can go backwards, right? We have these great options to do. I once a year pull out my Corvette saga, just the Avengers series, 176, 177, 178, or 175, 176, 177, and I just read it. Even from front to back, I read the article, I read all the articles in it, I read the ads, because even though I've read it 1,000 times, it's my book, right? It's my book. I own the very first book I ever got, January 25th, 1982, Avengers 129. It's in my store in the back. I've read it 1,000 times, upside down front. That's how we are with our collections. Yes. And what's great about comics, and get people like Nick, who's been collecting longer than me. I think Nick has been by 3 years or 4 years, is I can pull out a comic, obviously not this one, but I can pull out a comic in my private collection, and the second I see it, I could tell you where I bought it, when I bought it, not about how much I bought it, but I have this history with that comic book. It's my comic book. If everybody asks me what's my most expensive valued book in the store, it's my Avengers 129. In reality, in the shape it's in, it's worth about $2. If there's a fire in the store, I'm grabbing that, my Jack Kirby picture, because those two things I can't replicate. I can never get it back, right? Everything else I've had, 5, 6 AF-15s walking the store in the last 14 years, but those are my books, and I love those books. So very, very cool stuff. The other thing I want to talk about today is grading your books. Again, this is just an intro to collecting, the importance of collecting, and understanding the books that you have in front of it. In reality sense, even as an Overstreet advisor, 40 years in the business, I still don't understand grading. And I think you get these people that say they're graders and they know how to grade, yet they'll grab a book and they'll look at it and they'll say, oh yeah, that's a 9.8. And I'm like, you didn't even open up the book. How come you didn't check the pages? So very, very important that we're then going to break in a minute and a half here. I just want to give you an example of a CGC. So graded books, encapsulated. This is a great way to preserve your books if you want to preserve your books. If you like reading books, this is not a good way to read your books if it's encapsulated. I own 0 graded books in my collection. I don't foresee in the future ever owning a grading book, but that's me. I like to read everything. I like to touch, feel, taste. It's a great way, though, to create value. I disagree with a 9.6, 9.8, 9.4, 9.2. I think we need to have, 9, 9.5, 10, and 10, not these many little numbers in the middle, because that's why I disagree in grading. And I'm going to tell you right now, folks, and I know Nick is probably going to yell and scream that it is possible. There are no such thing as 10s. So this is the experience. I am going to be right back. This is 6-year Jesse James. Hit that like button, tell your friends, and I'll be back in a few. Or not.
Thanks for tuning into The Experience. Help us out and hit subscribe over on YouTube and click the bell when you do. Need some help? Scan the QR code in the bottom corner.
To be continued. 3 little words that hold the secret to the next great story. 3 words that will thrill you, confound you, give life to new possibilities. Every variation of To Be Continued is a promise of adventure, a promise of excitement, a promise of unseen wonders and unexplored worlds, a promise that every issue you read makes you a part of a never-ending journey, and behind every page there will be an unopened door waiting for you. This story to be continued at your local comic book shop today. Visit comicshoplocator.com today.
Are you a comic creator? Are you a publisher? Do you make a comic book product? Do you own a retail store? Do you do something I haven't thought of? Who are you and what do you do? Let us know by advertising on The Experience and invite our viewers to patronize your product. Message the EXP on social media or email us the_EXP@yahoo.com for more details.
All right, I am back. I am Jesse James, 6-year Jesse James out of Glendale, Arizona from Jesse James Comics. We've been in business since August 28th, which is Jack Kirby's birthday, 2009. I actually was going to open on the 1st, and I said, nope, I'm going to open on the 28th. So I had to wait 27 days before I opened my store, even though it was complete, because we had to honor Jack Kirby. I actually ran his line in 1982, so I have a famous picture with him. I have another picture that I have not decided if I want to show the public. It's a very cool picture of me eating spaghetti with him at 12 years old, and he has his hand on my head while I'm eating spaghetti. Talking about World War II. He talked about World War II a lot. So very, very cool. This is the experience. Next couple of weeks, I will start bringing guests on as well. So they'll be popping in, popping out for 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Of course, if I argue with someone, they'll probably only be in for 1 minute because I got to win that argument. But the big thing is understanding and enjoying comics. I think what's happened in our virtual talk show world, it's about talking about the negatives of comics in the world, conventions, or this person did this, or how dare they do that, and it becomes this opinionated talk shows, but they forget that it's all about the comics. It's about opening up the front page. If you want to buy cover art and you're an Art Germ fan, or you're a fan, or a Scotty Young, two of the hottest covers out there, cover artists out there, Peach and all that, that's fine too, right? It's very, very cool. But at the end of the day, there is a notion of you're collecting something, and in comic book world, you have this big divide. And I said this at the beginning of the thing, that there's only, I think, and I would have to challenge myself on this, maybe 5 shows where the talk show main host is actually in the comic book industry or actually owns a comic book store. I'm always on shows correcting people about how exclusives are sold, how comics are made, how print runs are created, or understanding media releases, right? So very, very important that you come in, you enjoy yourself, you get to know your store owner. There's no other business in the world where a customer comes in 52 times a year. Think about it. And I'm not talking about Walmart. I'm talking about a store, just a store. Even when I was with Nordstrom, I expected to see my customer maybe 6 times a year, and that was like a high amount of times. We get to see our customers 52 times a year, free comic book day, local comic book day, all your anniversaries. I have a car show, store signing. So you might see your customers 70 to 100 times a year. And so your job is to create that relationship with the customer. Is he into action heroes? Does he only like superheroes? Does he like animal comic book heroes? Does he only shop in my dollar section, right? So I'm not going to show him key books, or he only buys keys. Then let me show him my key books, or mystery packs, right? Mystery packs are huge. People love mystery packs for some odd reason, right? So very, very cool. The other big thing about the modern comic book world, and this is very important for a lot of people to know, the way comics are sold today, the only difference that there is today is that we live stream. I'm talking to you live streaming, but we started direct selling, and no matter what anybody says, direct selling started in 92 with Image or XYZ. Direct selling has been going on for 50, 60, 70 years, because you could always buy comics through your comic book, right? You could buy back issues or Mile High Comics double page ads, right? So very, very cool. So we're not really advancing the wheel by anything we do. Live streaming, yes, is new, but everything else is still the same. There's nothing has changed out there other than we have 3,100 comic book stores across the nation, and over 150,000 people selling comic books that don't own comic book stores. You have publishers who say, listen, I'm going to distribute, I'm going to do conventions, but then I'm going to do crowdfunding, I'm going to do Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and I'm going to touch more customers. So very, very important. So I had fun doing the show where they have more guests on, more people jumping in to give you a little bit more information about collecting comics, where to go, and asking just great questions. Next week on Saturday, I will be on again. I will be talking about how to grade your comic and get the best essence of how to figure out the value of the comic. Again, I've been doing this 40 years. I'm not going to tell you I'm a professional grader. I can get close, but I think it's something that you should learn. I will have my buddy from one of the publishers on next week as well. So anyways, this is Jesse James. You've been watching The Experience. Make sure you hit that like button, share this out to your friends, check out all the shows on The Experience, jump in, ask questions, partake, have fun. Don't forget, read your comics and go to your local comic book shop, and we will see you on Saturday.
Get the inside scoop on everything happening at The Experience every week. Join our mailing list by scanning the QR code at the bottom of the screen and then watching your email inbox.